Hey everybody, Jane here, and we are going to try something new this year that I'm really excited about, and that is I want to participate in Books and Lala's Buzzwordathon. So, for those who don't know, I will link her video below. Books and Lala is a YouTuber who gives prompts every month for her Buzzwordathon readathon. And this year she actually did something slightly different. She is giving a word and she's giving a cover. So you're supposed to try to find books or a book that has the words that are her keywords and then what she's suggested for her cover. So this month the words are truth and lies and the cover is patterns. So since this is going to be a new series that I'm hoping to do all year, I did want to kind of lay down the ground rules of what I'm going to do before I show you the books that I'm looking to read this month in January, and I've already started one and we'll talk about that. But first, one of my goals this year, as some of you know, is to read more books for my shelves. So I want to prioritize books for this readathon that come straight from my shelves. If there is a book on my shelves that I can use for this readathon, that is going to be my go-to. If I can't find anything on my shelves that I can use for a readathon, my next choice is going to be books that I already have out from the library. I'm trying to have a lot less library books, but I'm still doing audio through Libby. So if I have a book that fits the descriptions that's out from my library or from Libby, those will be also things that I can pick. Another option is I have lots of books on my Kindle. I don't read on my Kindle very often. It is not my preferred way to consume books. But if I can't find it on my shelf and I don't already have it out from the library, I will allow myself to pick it up on my Kindle. I can't imagine a scenario where I cannot find any books that are either on my Kindle or on my shelf, but only if I can't, then am I able to take stuff out from the library that wasn't already out to begin with. So that's kind of the rules we're going to play with. Hopefully get some books off of my shelves because reading my own TBR is so important to me, especially because a lot of the books that I own are ones that I want to read, but that I don't expect I'll want to keep. I tend to only keep books that I consider favorites, and everything else I read, I enjoy, but if I know I'm not going to reread it, it goes on to Pango or to friends or wherever I happen to rehome it. Anyway, this month I did find 4 books on my shelves that fit the descriptions. So for the keywords, the first book that we have is All the Little Liars by Charlene Harris. This is a mystery. I don't want to read too much into what it's about, but we'll talk about it once we get to that point, I guess, in the vlog. Hopefully I get to this one. I've read Charlene Harris before. She is the one who did the True Blood series, and she's also done a couple other mystery series that I have liked a little bit less than True Blood. So hopefully this one works well. It's fairly short, so it is one of the ones I am fairly sure I'm going to get to, and I'm super excited about it. The next book for this readathon that I'll be honest, I'm not sure I'm going to get to because it's a chunker, and while I'm interested, I may be a little less interested, and that is I Know This Much Is True. So this book has to do with twins, and one of the twin brothers, I believe, is schizophrenic, and then the other is not. And so it's kind of like them dealing with being twins and having a twin who is mentally ill. It is a fairly chunky book, so of all the ones on my list for this month, it is the one that I think may not get read if one is not going to get read. It is fairly big print though, so I might be able to get through it if I do start it. I don't expect it's going to be as readable as some of these other books though. But yeah, so I had one for truth, one for lies, and then for pattern books I found 2. The first one is Family, Family, and the pattern is the stairs. I don't know if this is quite what BooksandLaLa had in mind, but I felt like it was close enough. I actually got this from a Goodreads giveaway, so it is one that I really do want to prioritize during this video if I can. It is in some form about adoption, which is something that is near and dear to my heart and something that I love books about. So I'm very excited to give this a try. Hopefully we get to it this month. We're already a little ways into January when I'm recording this, so it could go either way. Then is the last book that is the pattern one, and one that I've already started reading, so we can give a little discussion about that, and this is Miss Jane. This obviously has the pattern of the peacock on the front, the feathers. So this is what I'm currently reading for this vlog. This is an interesting book. I don't love it. I am about the 80 pages in mark and maybe like a quarter into the book. I do think at this point that I'm going to finish it, but I'm not 100% sure because it could definitely go multiple ways. This book is about a little girl born in the early 1900s. I think they said 1914. And she has a medical problem. It's never specified exactly, at least as far as I've gotten, what's going on, but it has to do with her bladder and her girl bits. So things are not as they should be. As soon as she was born, like the doctor said, like, I have to call somebody because I don't really know. The dad's like, well, is it a boy or girl? He's like, I think it's a girl, but we're not sure because things don't look right. And then like where I'm at in the story, she's like kindergarten age and she is incontinent. She is not able to hold her bowel and bladder. So like while it like a condition is not named, we know what the problem is. And this book is supposed to be about her managing life with these medical issues, particularly in a time when women's primary function was to have children and satisfy men, and how a woman might have difficulties finding a life for herself that don't involve in those things is kind of how it's pitched. So far the book is just like her growing up. So I'm sure we'll get more of the difficulties it's caused her. We are seeing some, like a couple of the other kids don't want to play with her because she's stinky, because she obviously has trouble keeping herself clean. I am enjoying the ideas behind this book, but I'm not necessarily loving everything. So this book, I believe, is copyright 2016, but it feels like it was written in the 1900s. Like it feels like a classic, which is not my favorite thing to read anyway. I think the author did that intentionally to give a sense of time, so I will forgive them for that, but it's very frustrating sometimes and a little challenging to read. I had times where I was trying to figure out who was who, or there was complex sentence structure, and I'm like, I'm not sure which character you're talking about or what you're trying to tell me, the reader. Also, this book obviously starts at her birth and we're just moving up her life. I had kind of hoped or expected when I read the synopsis that it was more like the middle, like we start when she's an adult and the challenges she's having. But instead, she's starting as a little kid. There's also like a lot of side stories. So the doctor has like a whole long, complex story. The doctor who delivered her and who's been doing her treatment, like his wife dies and he didn't have a great relationship with her anyway because she wasn't a very good wife to a country doctor and she was bored and she wanted to be out in town partying. But then she's in town partying and gets the influenza that's going around and he can't save her. And, you know, it's just a lot of things that feel like they're detracting from the story I actually care about, but it's still interesting enough that I'm not ready to call it quits on this book yet. Yet. I will say I had a couple moments too where the doctor was a little creepy. Like our main character, Miss Jane, has an older sister. And for a while, I thought the doctor was maybe into the older sister who's like a teenager, and it felt a little creepy, but now I'm not sure that I was maybe just misreading that, but there was a little bit of ick vibe to that. So yeah, mixed feelings on this so far. This is one that I'd gotten at a library sale, but it is on my shelves. All the books that I showed you are on my shelves. So 4 books potentially read off my shelf for this vlog. That's the goal. But yeah, I don't hate this, but I don't love it. And I wish it wasn't written like a classic. It is based in part on a true story. The author says that his great aunt, maybe? It's his great aunt. So this guy, the author, wrote in like the author's notes that this book is slightly based on his, like inspired by his great aunt, but that it is still a work of fiction. One thing I will criticize, because I think it's worth criticizing, is for a book that is about women's issues, it is written by a man. And I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that. So, can a man really understand the challenges that women who were valued for their ability to procreate babies and also their ability to please men, and that is the primary value in them as people because society, especially in the old days, sucked? Can a man really understand that just because it was his family member that went through it? Can he really understand the difficulties of being a woman in a society that doesn't have the things that are valued? This is a topic I'm very passionate about because in the culture and society I was raised in, women are also valued for those things. And as a woman who is plus size, I, had a hard time because I didn't feel like I had as much value because of my appearance. And then also I have infertility. I was able to see a doctor and have, with fertility treatments, 2 daughters, which is wonderful. But when I was dating within the culture that I was raised in, I'm being kind of vague. I'm sorry. If you're new here, I should specify. I was raised in a high demand religion. I won't say which one. I think I've mentioned it a few times before, but I'm not trying to call them out. It was a high demand religious background that I have. And in that culture, women are very much there for men, for babies and men, and don't feel like they have a lot of inherent value outside of wife and mother. So, like, the ideas in this book, I really feel like I can relate to, being a woman who has struggled with her own value because within the culture and systems of a society, because of body issues, my size, and then also infertility. So I think this is an important story. It's something I'm very invested in figuring out, like, what the telling is, but I'm just not sure I love it that it's written by a man. And I'm not sure that a man can really understand the complexities of a woman and her feelings about her value based on anatomy. But yeah, so far, Miss Jane is interesting, if not necessarily a wonderful, enjoyable read. And I plan to finish it and come back and tell you more, and then finish more books this month that we can talk about that are in the Buzzwordathon list. So if you are participating, awesome. Can't wait to hear about what you're doing as well. And I'll be back when I have read some more books. All right, guys, I am going to be DNFing Miss Jane around page 125. This book has just been a journey, and it's a journey that I am just not enjoying. Remember how I was like worried about a man writing about women's issues? Yeah. So this dude, this book, We have more of the doctor creeping on the teenager, which like comes out a little bit differently later, and it's just gross. And then we have like the teenage sister forcing her like 6-year-old, 7-year-old sister to watch her do it with a guy so that, you know, she can get money from him so that she can run away from home. You know, she's going to tell him that he knocked her up, but she needs her sister as a witness so that if anybody asks, she can prove that she was with this rich dude so that he'll give her money to take care of this pregnancy thing so she can move to town. As if those things weren't enough grossness. And they were. We also have a chapter where Jane is starting to have, you know, sexual feelings, and she's like 7. And it's because she ate oysters. She ate oysters, and now she's having these feelings, and it was just gross. So yeah, I'm not going to be continuing this book, and it's going to be a DNF, and it's not going to live on my shelves any longer. So I am very sad. I will also say, like, 130 some pages in, and like, this is nearly half the book. It's not quite half the book, but it's like nearly half the book. Jane is still a child. She's still not having any actual difficulties living in a world. This book doesn't feel like it's what I signed up for anyway. This book is supposed to be about a woman who is having issues living in a world where women are only valued for being women. You know, their parts, and she doesn't have the right parts. She has problems with her parts. And right now in this story, she's only 6 or 7, maybe 8. She's still a child. And like, if you as a woman are having problems in a world because of your parts and you're 7, that's a huge problem with the world, not with you. Like, I could understand if this was her being in her 20s and dating and having issues with marriage because, you know, how do you explain to a man, our life isn't going to be normal and what you expect because of my bits. But that's not what this book is. That's what I was kind of expecting from this book. That's not what this book is. It's a lot of the doctor being creepy and this girl being like, I'm never going to grow up and be normal, or people being like, you're never going to grow up and be normal. And there's a lot of just bad behavior from people. Like, at one point, the creepy doctor takes Jane by herself to the city, and like, he's not creeping on Jane, but probably only because she's, you know, born the way she is. He's probably not into that, which is great. I mean, as much as he's creeping on the older sister. Yeah, this book just made me mad. And like, why do we write books like this? And again, this is copyright 2016. So this is not an old book. This is not a book that is of its time. This is not a book that is just like, oh, we didn't know better. This is a published book from, I believe, 2016, and we're still creeping on children and having gross stuff. So yeah, that, I don't know why this is a thing, but it is, and this book is awful, and I'm done. So, coming to you with an update, I did finish Family. I know I didn't actually like take video of the process. I just went, read it, and finished it. I will tell you, the weather here has been atrocious. I've wanted to do nothing but cuddle up and read, and have not been feeling recording even a little bit. So I gave this book 5 stars. I really, really liked it. So it's been interesting. This video we had, our first pattern book was a DNF, and then we got a 5-star. So that is lovely. This book is about, it's about adoption. It's a complicated multi-layer book, and I think I'm probably at some point going to do like a detailed discussion of the book because it is so complicated. But the quick version of what it's about, there's an actress whose name is India. She is a adoptive mother. She has 2 adopted children, and she is in a movie about adoption. And in this movie, she plays a birth mother who is so distraught by her by giving away her child that she turns to drugs, and the child in question also turns to drugs, I believe, and the mother and child meet at a rehab, and it's just this whole sad movie about, healing that first wound when the mother and daughter reunite at this rehab and get to know each other. And that, that motherhood bond fixes them. And India, of course, being part of the adoption triad, has some opinions about the movie. And her opinions are, among other things, that the movie's not great. The movie isn't great adoption representation, and that, that she doesn't think it really accurately portrays all the nuance of adoption. Well, you have a ton of people speaking out and saying, basically stay in your lane, you don't know anything, you are an adoptive mom, you are not, you don't get to talk about the other parts of the triad of adoption. So when I say triad, if you're not in adoption communities, the triad is the birth mother, the child, and then the adoptive parents. Well, I guess the birth parents, not just the mother. The mother's the one we hear about most often. So anyway, India has spoken out publicly, and of course her bosses are angry with her. Everybody's angry with her. Everybody feels like she misspoke, misrepresented, shouldn't have said anything, all the stuff. Well, it turns out that she is a lot more involved in adoption than just being an adoptive mom. And we end up with a dual timeline, learning about her story, how she got to where she is, while also seeing her and her children combat this situation of negativity around her very public comments about adoption and about representation of adoption. It is a beautiful, complicated book that asks a lot of questions, has a lot of commentary. This book, I will say, is written by an adoptive mom. We do learn that in the author notes. Laurie Frankel adopted a little girl from Korea. And I think it was very interesting to have her kind of thoughts and commentary on things. I do think there is the nuance of adoptive parenting is one side of the triad of adoption, and it is a complicated thing, and also everybody deals with adoption a little bit differently, and everybody has their own opinions and feelings, and we can't class people together. And I think a lot of that happens, especially online, especially in online discussions. So I am in a lot of adoption groups online, partly because I would like to adopt someday. And the discussions can get pretty crazy and pretty wild. Everything from adoptees feeling that adoption should be completely illegal, that nobody should ever adopt, that adoption is the worst thing that could ever happen to anybody, to people defending adoption and saying, they are adopted and they feel like they are better off, that, they've in some cases met their birth family and are like, yeah, I wouldn't be the same person if I was raised that way. I have a friend who is adopted, and she and her sister actually were both adopted, and they had very different experiences with adoption, even though they have the same adoptive parents. One very much felt like there was a lot of trauma from the adoption. She didn't feel like she was close with her parents. And the other one, who was the one I was friends with, she did. She felt very close to her parents and, didn't necessarily miss that birth family bond. She did meet her siblings a little later and is in connection with them, but she never felt it was a bad thing to be adopted. She was very close to her adoptive parents. She took care of them up until their deaths, very, very close to them. So I think the commentary in this book, and it's a good commentary, is there are lots of adoption stories, and not just one adoption story is the only way we should and could look at things. Again, with that being said, I do think it's a little complicated that this story comes from an adoptive mother, as opposed to us hearing that kind of reassurance from a birth mother or a child given up for adoption. That's whose voice I would like to hear saying, adoption worked for me. Adoption was fine. Instead of having an adoptive mother saying adoption is fine, because of the triad, they kind of, in theory, have the most to gain and the least to lose, if you will. And since I'm not any part of the adoption triad, maybe I'm misspeaking. That is my understanding of a situation that I am not part of. So let me be really, really clear about that. But this book, it really was good. It was interesting. It hit on some hard topics. I loved it. I thought the characters were a lot of fun, even as we were talking about complicated things. The children in this book are so well done. I absolutely love kind of I don't know if she'd be considered the protagonist in some ways, but she's one of the very active children, and that is Fig, or characters. That is Fig, who is India's adoptive daughter. She sets a lot of things in motion. She's a very active protagonist in the story, even though I think it's supposed to really be India's story. And I would say, like, in the past timeline, India is very much the main character. But I would argue that in the current timeline, Fig is much more the main character. And I absolutely adored her, and I thought she was a lot of fun. So yes, I did really enjoy this book. It is, just for anybody who needs to know, it does take place during the pandemic, at least the present day stuff does. So if that is not something you're ready to read, just know that that is discussed. I was surprised how much it bothered me. I actually at one point broke down crying when they were talking about some of the very specific pandemic stuff. And it's not like a huge part of the book. It's not something that is like focused super on. It's more like casual mentions of, hey, everybody has to wear masks, or, traveling with COVID restrictions is really difficult. But that being said, I was not prepared for my reaction to that. So since other people who've also, lived through 2020 might have a reaction similar, so I did think I'd mention that. So yes, so we did finish our Buzzwordathon book with a pattern. We are only going to be doing one book with a pattern this month, unfortunately, because the other one was a DNF. And I don't have any other books with a pattern, and honestly, we're pretty close to the end of the month. So, that being said, I think I'm only going to be doing one more book for this video, and that is going to be All the Little Liars. So I haven't started this yet, but I will be starting it probably on my lunch break at work tonight. And depending on how quickly I get through it, I will hopefully give you an update and not read the whole book before updating you. But the other book just dragged me in and just held me, and I just also wasn't feeling the cold and miserableness of winter, and so wasn't feeling like an update. But yes, hopefully I will be able to give you an update about All the Little Liars. It is, I assume, some kind of mystery or thriller, and I'm excited to give it a try. Alright guys, so I'm updating you on All the Little Liars. I can never
remember what the title of this book is. I was telling a friend I was reading it, and I was like, is it Pretty Little Liars? All the Little Liars. So, I am a little more than halfway through, and it is very, very, very readable. A very quick read. This is an Aurora Teagarden mystery. It is not the first one. I believe I tried the first book and DNF'd it. And I talked to a friend about the series, and she had not enjoyed it. So I will say this is the first book in the series that I've read. And I generally like it. I will say if you're looking for a cozy mystery, this I would not say is cozy. I would say it's a mystery. It's pretty intense and has some content beyond what I would expect in most regular cozy mysteries. Luckily, I read all kinds of mysteries, so I wasn't too upset about this. So in this, we have Aurora Teagarden, who I don't know any background about her because I did not read the other books, other than she, in this book, has recently gotten married, and she is pregnant. Her brother from California has come to live with her, and he is a teenager. He's 15, and he is her half-brother. He's from her father's second marriage. He was having some issues at home and has come to live with her. They're getting him all set up at their house. And one day, he and his best friends disappear. And so far in the book, this has been Aurora and her husband Robin, who's a mystery writer, and everybody investigating what is happening and trying to figure out where these teens have gone and what has happened to them. So I am enjoying it so far. I do love that Aurora is pregnant. I'm enjoying that aspect of it. I love reading books where the character is pregnant. It takes me back to the days of my pregnancy, and so I really enjoy that bit of it. I am enjoying her as a character much more, I think, than I did when I read the first book. I don't have any desire to go back and read the previous books. I'm going to read this one and probably be a one and done for the series just because of my own experience with the first book. When I picked up the second book, I don't think I realized it was an Aurora Teagarden book, but I had DNF'd the very first book in the series, and I had heard from a friend some stuff about the early series. She'd read a few books in, and what she had to tell me about it made me feel like it wouldn't be for me. So I went into this very cautious. I am enjoying this book, but I don't think I'll be reading the rest of this series, though I do like Charlene Harris, and sometimes I get along with her books. Sometimes they're a little too strange or uncomfortable or ick for me. This one is not, but others have been. So I do plan to finish this one. I'm actually thinking I'll finish it tomorrow because I've read more than half today. So this is the first day I've been reading it, and I've read probably almost 3/4 of it so far. So I'm very excited. It's working well. I have an inkling of what happened to the kids and what's going on, but I'm not 100% sure. So I will read the rest, see how close I am to guessing, and let you know my final thoughts.
All right, guys, so I finished All the Little Liars, and I ended up giving it a 3-star. I liked it, but I didn't love it. So I was really, really invested in what was happening. I kind of had an inkling on what was going on. And then when we got all the reveals, I just kind of lost steam with it. I thought some of the things that we were told didn't necessarily make a ton of sense. I felt like some characters were acting very stupidly. And yeah, at the end of the day, this was fine. I'm not sad I read it, but it will definitely be leaving my shelf. So that is the 3 books that I read for this challenge. Hopefully next month I get some more books in, but I feel like this has been fairly successful. So just to give you a recap for this video, we tried Miss Jane and it was a DNF. We had All the Little Liars, and this was for the prompt Truth and Lies for the title, and it was just okay, so it will not be staying on my shelf. And finally, for the pattern, we had Family Family, and this was a 5-star, and this will be staying on my shelf, at least for now. So we are getting rid of 2 and keeping 1. So I would say that is a fairly successful video. So yes, what did you read for these prompts if you took part in Buzzwordathon? And let me know in the comments below. Also, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. This has been Jane. Bye! Pictures and patterns put into words that stream across the page.